Welcome to part 2 of a walk around Barnwood. We're going to walk from west to east, from Rabbit Roundabout, Walters Roundabout, to Upton Lane, which is what I consider to be the eastern boundary of Barnwood. So join me in part 2 of a walk around Barnwood.
Having gone from south to north across the parish, we will now travel Barnwood's Spine Road from west to east, starting at probably the most iconic part of Barnwood, Rabbit Roundabout. So called for the number of rabbits that inhabit the space, certainly not the ones we see here, for their tenure was short-lived but entertaining. Said to have its own website, the residents can often be seen of a summer's evening feeding on the food that is placed on the roundabout by well-wishers. This roundabout was at some time considered to be the busiest in the county, for it once had a fifth road joining it, the entrance to the large Walls ice cream factory, which occupied all the land from there to the link road between the C&G roundabout and Elbridge Court. It still retains its name Walls Roundabout on maps and signs, even though the factory and its entrance have moved. So this is the view looking from the roundabout towards Hucklecote eastwards, and we will now travel down this spine of Barnwood. Today called Barnwood Road, it has been known both as London Road and Turnpike Road. From at least Roman times as Ermine Street, this has been the main route into Gloucester from the east, dropping down the Cotswold escarpment at Birdlip and making its way through Barnwood onto Denmark Road and down into Kingsholm. Taken about 1935 from about the same spot, this is before the houses either side of the road were demolished when the roundabout was enlarged and the dual carriageway constructed about 1964. In the distance, on the left-hand side, can be seen a long, low building. This was Charles Browett's tea or refreshment rooms. And during the war, W.J. Lydiate, Charles Browett's son-in-law, took over the business. The tea room was a popular venue for servicemen working in the area. The adjacent petrol pumps were rented out to a William Maidstone, who was shown on the left of this picture, taken about 1964. Notice the hand-operated petrol pumps, and the gentleman standing next to the vehicle is believed to be a Philip Morgan, the owner of the splendid 1933 Austin Light 12.4 Harley. Lydiate rebuilt the premises and installed a post office. The picture, taken about 1950, shows the tea rooms, post office and petrol station. The pumps, as you will note, are now electric. Right up to the 1960s, the cafe, as it was frequently called, was used as a local venue for functions such as wedding celebrations. Behind the pumps is a large white building, then called Danes Court. Further changes took place with the move of the shop and post office into the adjacent house. This picture shows Gordon Knight with his Walls ice cream tricycle outside the new frontages about 1970. A most familiar figure around Barnwood at that time. So what happened to the tea rooms, garage and post office? Well, firstly the site was sold to Budgeons about 2007. and the shop and forecourt remodelled. And then, several years later, it was taken over by Marks and Spencer. The post office moved to Danes Court, which had been a bed and breakfast establishment for many years, but was now empty. Originally, this house was known as the Lawn, and from 1867, for many years, the Gloucester worthy Benjamin Bonner and his family lived there. Bonner was not only Barnwood's church warden, but he was also the diocesan registrar. The organ in the church was given in his memory. In early 2001, Danes Court was demolished and a block of flats was erected in its place. And this is the view today. I have superimposed the view of 1960 against today's view to show how it has changed. On the other side of the road is today the Gloucester Deaf Association. Previously, this building was Barnwood's Church of England National Primary School. Built in 1874 with space for 78 children and a schoolhouse, the school, costing £1,600, was funded by voluntary subscriptions. And the driving force was the then vicar, Hugh Fowler. So keen was Fowler to see this project completed that he gave some of his land from the vicarage site, which was then in Colin Road, on which to build the school. Several extensions were added in the 1890s, and by the turn of the 19th century, the building was able to accommodate 230 pupils. With only a few minor additions and alterations, the school changed little before it was vacated in 1990 for its current site in Colin Road. While we are at the school, a slight diversion. For many years, Brian and I wondered where the first Barnwood post office was before it moved to Lydiat's. We knew it was on Barnwood Road, but where? It was during one of our talks when we were showing this picture of the children in the school playground that we realised that the answer was in this picture. For here in the background is that post office, confirmed by several of the older residents of Barnwood who commented about the smell as you entered. Today there are apartments on this ground which were constructed about 2015. And this is the view from those apartments of Barnwood's first post office, now of course a private dwelling. This is the site where the post office would have been. Right next door is a pair of large semi-detached houses. The one on the right, Tillingbourne, was occupied by George Bonner and his family for 7 years. George was the son of Benjamin Bonner, who, as you will remember, was the diocesan registrar who lived in Danes Court. Sometimes later, it was a nursing home run by matron Beddoe Thomas, and here we have 2 pictures of her. This was the birthplace of many of Gloucester's children, as this picture, taken in 1948, clearly indicates. Why has a Barnwood a working men's club called the Wootton? Well, around 1930, the members of a growing working men's club, which used the canteen of Sisson's factory in Elmbridge for their meetings, decided to find a more suitable location. A house halfway up Wootton Pitch was identified, and the club moved into the new Wootton Club. Meanwhile, a more suitable premises had come on the market called Leslie Court, and possibly with an eye to the benefit of owning such a building and its lands, it was purchased by the club and the club moved there, retaining the name. Its grounds ran from the main road down to the brook. It was not until the 1970s that extensions were made. It was ravaged by fire sometime in the 1980s. However, if you go into the car park at the rear of the club, the house can still be seen, surrounded by all the extensions that have been made to the club over the years. This is a rear view. And this is a side view. Both show the original house, which forms the heart of the club. Inside it is still possible to see the outlines of the original house, though much has changed. It is also said to be haunted, though I suspect the only spirits there are those in a bottle. Today, part of it is used as Barnwood's fourth post office, having moved after a few years' delay from Danes Court when that was demolished. Opposite the club stands a block of flats and the co-op store. The store was initially run by Morrison's when the building was constructed in 2014. Before that, the site was a storage area for many, many years. But before that, it was Barnwood's fire station. This shows the parade outside the fire station when Gloucester City Fire Brigade was transferred to the local authority control after the 1947 Fire Service Act. The building continued as a fire station until about 1956, when it was bought by Barnwood House Hospital and used for storage. Next to the co-op, facing Barnwood Avenue, is Avenue Cottage, dating from 1897. This could also be referred to as the Architect's Cottage. Walter B. Wood, an architect of some repute, lived there for some 30 years, between 1897 and 1927. His architectural work was extensive, and he was responsible for the design of many buildings in Gloucester. In Barnwood, in addition to the mundane work such as extensions to cottages, Wood was responsible for the design of the church lych gate and the designs and alteration of many of its houses. Around 1898, the parish's first street light was positioned on the main road outside Avenue Cottage. The entire cost was met by Wood. After he died, Avenue Cottage was purchased by Barnwood House Hospital. Next we come to one of the newer buildings in Barnwood, the Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This building dates from 1970, when the congregation that had been meeting in a house on this site demolished it and moved into their new building that had been erected alongside. The house that they had occupied since 1963 was known as Linthorpe. This had previously been owned since 1937 by Barnwood House Hospital, when it was used to house 5 male patients. Before that, this large family house with its extensive grounds was occupied by the Davis family. On the opposite side are 2 buildings that are historically linked. The first, a day nursery. The second, Barnwood Reading Room. The day nursery is a building called Chalfont. This has a plaque on its wall with the date 1877 on it, so one could assume it was built about that time. It was once the home of a lady we met earlier in Barnwood Avenue, Winifred Ridderford, unmistakable here in her fine hat. Winifred and her husband George previously lived in Barnwood Lodge, a very large house surrounded by extensive lands just up the road at the corner of Barnwood Road and Upton Lane. Sadly, George died unexpectedly, and she moved into the smaller property here at Chalfont. Although I said a smaller property, nevertheless Chalfont is still a big house, and when this picture was taken in 1898, it was surrounded by lawns and gardens. Here we see Mrs. Ridderford again, with 2 companions and a dog sitting in the croquet lawn. So what is the connection between Chalfont, Mrs. Ridderford, and the reading room? Here then is the reading room, just a short distance up the road from Chalfont. It was built in 1898 for the parish council as a building for their meetings, and was designed by Walter B. Wood. Originally conceived as extending some way back from the main road, having meeting rooms, a large hall and a stage, the scheme had to be abandoned for lack of funds. In fact, the reduced scheme itself nearly did not get built, and it was only through the generosity of Mrs. Ridderford, who gave not only £250 for the construction, but also a strip of the western part of her Chalfont Gardens on which to build it. Right from the start, the building was referred to as the Reading Room, for although designed as a parish meeting room, it was built with two 9 by 6 foot reading bays on the north or front of the building, where there is now a kitchen. It was arranged for chess, draughts and other games to be played in the room, but no pastimes that lent themselves to gambling were allowed. Later on, a boxing ring was installed in the main room, with the ropes being attached to rings screwed to the corners of the room. The building is still in use today and has recently undergone restoration and upgrade. Mrs. Ridderford wished the building to be a memorial to her husband, and so a memorial to George Ridderford was positioned on the front of the building. He was a well-known and highly respected Gloucester solicitor who held many important public appointments, including that of County Treasurer. It is said that where he lived, Barnwood Lodge, had its own electric generator and was the first property in Barnwood to have electric lighting. He died suddenly, aged 48, and is buried in Barnwood. And now we come to the crossroads in the heart of Barnwood. The junction of Barnwood Road with Church Lane, which goes off to the right, and Welverland Lane, which goes off to the left. There's plenty to mention at this point in our journey. Firstly, not so many years ago, this was a very tree-lined road, as the picture shows. Church Lane off to the right, and Welverland Lane is a small lane off to the left. A quick detour from here up Church Lane shows the walls that surround Barnwood House Hospital on the left. And then we pass Wootton Brook, cascading out of Barnwood Park, under the road and onwards to the River Severn. A little further up is the entrance to the park and St. Lawrence Church, where we started our tour. Back to Welverland Lane. A map of 1780 shows that this lane led to an area referred to as Welfurlong, from which the name Welverland may well have derived. Welverland Lane and the track beyond have long been recognised as a route from Barnwood to Churchdown, and may well have also been the route between St. Lawrence in Barnwood and St. Bartholomew's Church on the top of the hill. In recent times, this lane was the main entrance to the extensive farmlands of Barnwood House Hospital, and the retirement complex Pegasus Court, which we see here, is where the farmhouse and farm buildings once stood. On the opposite side of the lane are a number of semi-detached cottages, which were built by the hospital to house staff who needed to be on call or easily available. The Salutation Inn, demolished in 1817, is believed to have stood close to this entrance for some 150 years, for it had been there since 1672, when it was assessed as having 11 hearths. So it was not a small establishment. This was an important building, offering hospitality to travellers to and from Gloucester, and in the late 1700s it was where the parish court conducted its business. Welverland Lane now works its way through the industrial complex of Barnwood Fields, over a number of footbridges and onwards to both Elmbridge and Churchdown. One such footbridge was constructed at the time that all this area was part of Barnwood House Hospital Farm. This picture shows the farm cows being brought home for milking over the newly constructed bypass. Look at the distance and you can see the tall chimney, which was the hospital boiler house. No houses in the area, just fields. This is almost the same view today. Sainsbury's car park is just visible on the left. I have been making references to Barnwood House Hospital. This was a large and significant mental asylum that dominated Barnwood for some 100 years. There is very little evidence today. However, on our journey we can see some remnants. The first of which will be visible in front of us as we exit Welvernon Lane into Barnwood Road. Some of the pillars of the hospital entrance are visible in the wall running along the road. The hospital was behind this wall, and its grounds stretched from here southwards to what is today Abbeymead Avenue. This is that entrance with the exit just visible in the distance. Opposite the entrance is another part of the hospital, the coach house and stable block, which housed in the early days of the hospital 2 horses and a carriage. These were used to take patients out for excursions. This is the stable block about 1910, and you can see its appearance has changed very little in over a century. The next building that is associated with the hospital is North Cottage, today used by Emmaus, but for many years before that was used both as a nursing home for patients and after that accommodation for nursing staff. The building probably dates from the middle of the 1800s and has been extensively added to and enlarged over the years. Much older than North Cottage is this building at the junction of Barnwood Road and Upton Lane. This is called the Manor House, which dates from 1740, when it was the home of the Bubb family. It is said that Sir Charles Wheatstone was born in this house. The Bubbs were his maternal grandparents, and it seems highly likely that his mother returned to the family home in order to give birth. Sir Charles related that he spent many a happy time playing in its grounds. The house was eventually purchased by Barnwood House Hospital when it was used for both nurse accommodation and as a nursing home. When the main hospital building closed in 1968, the remnants of the hospital moved here. However, this was not a successful operation and the unit soon closed. It then opened as a daycare centre, expanding the Trust's operations to include sheltered housing. It has seen many alterations during this time, the original building being surrounded by extensions and additions as its function changed. All these activities and the future of the site are now currently up for review.
So here I am standing at what I consider to be the eastern end of Barnwood, the junction of Upton Lane, which is running over behind us here, and Barnwood Road. Behind me is Hucklecote. But interestingly, this group of houses here are still referred to as Barnwood Road. They're on the site of what used to be Barnwood Lodge, at one time occupied by Mr. and Mrs. George Ridderford of Reading Room fame. So, this side Hucklecote, this side Barnwood. Behind me you can see Aldi's supermarket, built fairly recently on the site of what was Chambers Barnwood Garage. They've been there for many years. I still consider that to be part of Barnwood because the garage was always known as Barnwood Garage. Well, there we are. That's a walk around Barnwood, having a look at some of the houses and places of interest. I do hope you've enjoyed it. I enjoyed making it for you. But that's all for now. See you soon.